The 80th anniversary is real.
Yo, what's up?
Well, we're finally here. The 80th anniversary of the Railway series. Oh, how it stood the test of time and had beloved characters that are well remembered within the fandom to this day. And although the book series eventually got cancelled in 2011, the legacy of the Railway series just never dies out in general. And I think it's pretty cool, I guess. And yes, this is the 12th entry of this AU Low Rambling series that I randomly created almost about 2 years ago by this point. And yeah, I guess that's it for basically me just talking about this thing, I guess. So let's just get started with this AU Low Ramblings, shall we? Number 1. Around the mid-1950s, the Northwestern region was suffering through a locomotive shortage, and they knew they needed an engine to operate on secondary services along their main lines and secondary lines. Their timing could have been better, as, around the same time, an order of 15 BR Standard Class 06s, otherwise known as the Clan class, had been cancelled due to the draft of the British Railways' infamous modernization plan, and so the Northwestern region had decided to build 3 of their own Clan classes at their own workshops at Crovan's Gate. They would enter into service around late 1955 and early 1956 to operate secondary express trains between Teignmouth and Liverpool, Manchester, Bradford, and Leeds. They would also operate on other secondary duties, including the Scottish Southern Mail train, which ran at night between Teignmouth, Edinburgh, and Glasgow until their inevitable withdrawal in 1967, in which they were placed in storage for a movement known as the Strategic Steam Reserve during the Cold War, but it was eventually revealed by the Northwestern region of British Railways later on during the early 1990s that this was never the case. What actually happened to the Clan classes of Sodor is that they were all dismantled and were soon placed in the storage at the back of the sheds, as the necessary components to need to build the locomotive was sold off to be scrapped, and leaving the dismantled locomotives to be in storage until one of them was sold off at a private auction to an unknown buyer. And although the rest of the dismantled parts for the Clan class was soon sold off for scrap, the unknown buyer which bought out the portion of the Clan class was soon revealed to be part of the Clan class project, a project to create a new build engine of the British Rail Standard Class 06, which would be given the name Angus, soon keeping the legacy of the BR Standard Class 06s of both the mainland and the island alive and well. Number 2. Around the winter of 1935, the infamous Flying Kipper accident had occurred when a fish train from Teignmouth to Manchester rammed into the rear of an LMS goods train traveling between Teignmouth and Carlisle. Nobody was killed in the accident, but a few people were injured, and so the locomotive that was involved in the accident, named Henry, was sent to crew to be repaired. Meanwhile, as a response to an engine down, they had loaned an LNER H3-260 steam locomotive and was soon placed into service around mixed traffic duties around the Northwestern Railway, and it was proven to be reliable, even pulling a fish train between Teignmouth and Kildare and later Vicarstown for the foreseeable journey. But the locomotive, being an LNER-owned locomotive, was soon sold off to the LNER, where it was placed back into service with its said company and later British Railways until its inevitable withdrawal in the 1960s, where, unfortunately, it was scrapped. Meanwhile, the engine that was involved in the accident was rebuilt into an LMS design by one of Topham's friends, that being Sir William Stanier, and throughout the rest of his career, he is still seen doing his mixed traffic duties, pulling passengers, goods, and even a few secondary duty services around the island, in which the locomotive is still operating with us to this day, while one of the H3s was later bought out by the Northwestern region, a locomotive numbered 203 from the LNER. The locomotive was restored and put back in service around the late 1960s and now can be seen doing its mixed traffic duties as it was intended, just like back at home. Number 3. Around Barrow-in-Furness, a town area located within Cumbria, there is a train station known as Barrow-in-Furness, where interchange between the other railway and the Northwestern Railway would occur. However, there used to be a train station known as Barrow-in-Furness Strand, a station which was opened in 1869 but was closed in 1882 when the new station was opened by the Furness Railway. The station complex would later be sold off to the Sodor and Mainland Railway as their new Barrow station for express trains traveling between the island and Strand station itself, with passengers from Sodor coming in and out of the station throughout its entire lifespan under the ownership of the Sodor Mainland Railway and the Northwestern Railway. Unfortunately, in 1925, due to a contract between the LMS and the NWR, they moved their termini to the Barrow Central Station, leaving the Strand Station to be shut down and the lines ripped up. Meanwhile, Barrow Central Station would remain like this until the Second World War, where it would be rebuilt into its current form, and as of today, Barrow-in-Furness Station is still operational with network rail, as the Sodor Mainland Railway Strand yards located within Barrow-in-Furness are still in use with the privatized Northwestern Railway, with the tradition of transferring their rolling stock with the other railway rolling stock happening until 2011, when newer and modern power caused it to be abolished. The NWR also bought out the Furness Railway sheds, as they still use this type of sheds near Barrow-in-Furness, but also uses the sheds at Strand to connect with the other railway zone rolling stock around the Cumbrian and Furness lines alongside the Sudrian main lines of the island of Sodor, and he still do so to this day. Number 4. Reverend's first character that he created, known as Edward, is a Furness Railway K2, a fleet of 8 440 steam locomotives. They were built by Sharp Stewart between 1896 and 1900 for operating on express trains around the Furness Railway network. Unfortunately, they were all withdrawn between 1929 and 1931, with one exception being preserved, while the rest were scrapped. Engine number 37 was built in 1896 to operate express trains around Barrow and Furness until it was withdrawn and was shipped out to Sodor during the First World War in 1915. Now under the ownership of the NWR, number 37, now named Edward, would continue on in the service until being used less and less, but was later used more. And after helping Henry with the Express, he was used on secondary duties around the Northwestern Railway, with him even operating on his own branch line around 1948. Around 1956, after saving James, he was sent to the Crovens Gate Works for an overhaul, with using parts from a scrapped NER R1 to become a Furness Railway K2 and R1 hybrid. He would remain like this until an incident involving his cylinders and an exploit would occur, but was later rebuilt, and as of today, he can still be seen operating around the Northwestern Railway and even on his own branch line ever since, as a happy little engine. Number 5. The Doncaster Works of the Great Northern and later LNER were planning to build a 462 Pacific, a first of their kind, at Eastern Nigel Gresley, who was the CME of both the GNR and the LNER. However, the rejected designs were later stolen, taking the 1915 draft away from Doncaster to an undisclosed location within the Midlands, and eventually the LNER A1 would be completed around 1921. Meanwhile, an unknown locomotive builder, who had a grudge against Gresley, had his team build the locomotive at their undisclosed workshops at Harrowsgate. However, what came out of the works soon proved to be a mistake, and thus the white elephant named Henry was built. He was soon sold to the Northwestern Railway in 1922, where it got bricked up in a tunnel but it was eventually released when Gordon broke down and helped out Edward with the Express, thus leading to him getting a repaint of his blue livery. However, passengers were confused about this and he was soon repainted back into his green livery. However, due to his steaming problems thanks to his small firebox, he was given special coal until an accident involving the flying kipper had occurred, where he was sent to crew and was later rebuilt into an LMS design of that of Sir William Stanier. Having returned to service around that fall of 1935, he would continue on with the Northwestern Railway and later Northwestern Region, while also having his own little super rescue movement. And as of today, he can still be seen operating around the island, pulling goods and passenger trains to this day.
Number 6. The Doncaster Works was building a steam locomotive that was the first of its kind built by Sir Nigel Gresley, and this was known as the Great Northern and later LNER A1 462 Pacifics.
They would be used on the top line expresses around the East Coast Main Line, but they ended up on other places as well during their heyday on the LNER and later twilight years of British Railways. And by the late 1960s, all of them had been withdrawn from service and were soon cut up for scrap, with the only survivor being number 4472, named Flying Scotsman.
Around 1921, an unknown numbered LNER A1 was built and was soon sold off to Sodor after trials had been completed around the East Coast Main Line around the Great Northern Railway, and was given the name King Gordon I. He would be seen pulling the express from Titmuir to Vickerstown, but sometimes had a bit of mishaps here, there, and everywhere. He would also be seen pulling goods trains from time to time, which he didn't like. But times have changed, and when Gordon saw his dreadful state of the world moment, he was reunited with his brother, the Flying Scotsman, while on a road tour on Sodor, thus keeping the legacy of the A1s alive and well. He would continue on pulling the express until his retirement in 2011, where he was used on local trains, and as of today, you can still see him pulling local trains and even on the occasional road tours across the island and on the mainland, and he's still operational with us to this day. Number 7. Within its industry of heart, the town of Kildane is often remembered as the heart of Sodor's industry, in which manufacturing plants and industrial sites were built along the central part of the city, which is why, in the 1960s, an American car manufacturing company named Ford had recently built 2 plants located within England, one in Dagenham and the other in Halewood. These plants were built to handle the manufacturing of automobiles which would be used along the British roadways around the mainland, via using specialized wagons to carry vehicles across Great Britain. The Ford Kildane plant was opened in 1968. Its location is proximately near to Kildane, where they would mass produce their cars and then would be transported onto wagons towards every sector on the island and on the mainland. They would then take their recently manufactured cars onto their car dealership areas across the island of Sodor and on the mainland, with even the Ford Motor Company even owning a few locomotives, with one of them being owned by the Yorkshire Engine Company to work at Halewood, while at Darningham, they would own a few fleet of steam locomotives built by several different manufacturers, and even an ex-British Railways Class 04 diesel locomotive to help out with the work around the plant, including a British Thomson Houston-built diesel-electric locomotive from 1932 that would also help out with the work at the plant. The plant in Kildane also helps out with manufacturing automobiles, which would then be taken out to dealerships across both sectors. But the plant in Kildane also hosting a few fair share of locomotives, including a few steam locomotives that have been bought out from industrial sites, one Yorkshire engine-built diesel locomotive, and an ex-British Rail Class 04 to help out with the work at the plant. All of these plants are still in operation with us to this day, as the Ford Halewood, Dagenham, And Kildane plants still manufacture these automobiles with newer and advanced technology that makes the process of making a car much easier for the men that worked around the manufacturing of automobiles. Despite this, the railways still play a huge role in carrying the necessary components it needs to create a car within the automotive plant, and as stated earlier, recently manufactured cars to their car dealerships. And the Kildane's plant's proximity to the Ballydrell cutoff and its location just south of the town within its industrial zones still see regular traffic around this portion of the branch line, as these industrial sites of Kildane, Halewood, and Dagenham still see use for the Ford Motor Company as of today, and is still in use ever since. Number 8. The milk train used to operate around the mainland, carrying milk from the precious dairy farms in towards the city, where they would be dropped off and would be carried along towards their destinations. The milk train would run up until the 1980s, when the Cornwall and Welsh services were discontinued. Thus, no milk train services had ever ran on the mainland. The island of Sodor also hosts a few fleet of milk trains that ran between Titmouth and Barrow-in-Furness and into the mainland, with the early morning milk service being famous because of its rolling stock variety, which was used within that type of service. And it also makes a few stops along the main line and connects up to the Farquhar branch line via a through milk train service up towards Farquhar. A varied fleet of 4-wheeled and 6-wheeled wagons would be used to carry the milk churns between Farquhar from the northernmost point of the station towards the station of Knapford or Titmouth, which is usually pulled by a diesel rail car or one of the other Farquhar engines that would carry the milk, especially Daisy though. The Sudrian milk train would continue to operate until the 1980s, when the last of the milk trains that ran between Farquhar and Knapford was discontinued in 1984, and as of today, no milk train services had ever operated around the island. It is sadly missed by all that had seen it roll by in their memories. Number 9. The B-17s were a fleet of 73 built 460 10-wheelers that were built by Sir Nigel Gresley at their Donington Works, the Robert Stephenson Company, and the North British Locomotive Works. Between 1928 and 1937, were pulling express trains along the Great Eastern Main Line, but they were mostly seen outside of the Great Eastern system by operating trains out of London's King's Cross on the East Coast Main Line and at London's Marylebone Street on the Great Central Main Line, and all of them were not cut up for scrap until 1960. Around 1958, an LNER B-17 was loaned onto the island and was named Hull City, or Hull for short. He would be traveled along the Northwestern Main Line, alongside a B-12 numbered 8572. The B-12 and the B-17 would perform superbly by the Northwestern region, and even considering on buying both the B-17 and the B-12s for their superb service. Unfortunately, the other railway refused to let the NWR buy out both the B-17 and the B-12s, and both of them were later sent away, and later Hull City was scrapped in 1960. However, the replica version of the city of Sandringham is currently in construction, so the legacy of the B-17s would still remain within their memories and this brand new replica model of that said engine. And finally, number 10. The LNER B-12s were a fleet of 81 460 10-wheelers that were built between 1911 and 1921, with 10 more being built in 1928. And they were used on the express trains around the Great Eastern Main Line, with a surviving member of the class, 8572, being preserved at the North Norfolk Railway. Speaking of 8572, this engine, at least in my EU, was also sent to the Northwestern region on trial alongside a B-17, like I stated earlier, to be named Hull City. 8572, with its BR number 61572, was seen pulling express trains between Timoth, Knapford, and Vickerstown, and would also prove to be superbly reliable at it. And so, plans were made, or at least the rumors would say, that the Northwestern region would buy out both the B-17s and the B-12s. However, the other railway, on the other hand, didn't want the NWR to buy out both the B-12s and the B-17s. And so, both of them were later sent away back to the other railway after their trials were completed.
Fortunately for the B-12, unlike Tool City, which was scrapped, 8572 is now preserved,
and it currently resides at the North Norfolk Railway
after being withdrawn in the 1960s. And the locomotive still can be seen on other heritage railways, as well as the Northwestern Railway for operational rail tours or on odd jobs around the island. And as of today, the locomotive is currently under an overhaul, with the legacy of the B-12s still remaining with us to this day, with this preserved member of the Great Eastern Express passenger engines.
Well, this concludes this video, I guess. I initially never really thought that this little blue tank engine had an impact in my life. Sure, I don't really care about it that much anymore, but there's just something in my heart that just screams nostalgia whenever I look back through the memories of when I used to first watch this show and actually liked it, and the information that it gets years later just hits me. Although, I am kind of surprised on how anything can potentially happen in this whole type of ordeal. Although, yes, I did left the fandom a year ago, but I still think that it has an impact on me. But anyway. The next one will probably be coming out on July. I'll make sure of it, as I'll be doing this on time. As I also got a special video for June for a certain blue hedgehog, and potentially more commentary and the usual things for at least the rest of 2025 and into 2026. So yeah. Oh yeah, and one more thing. Happy 80th anniversary to the Railway series. And I guess I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!